What if a piece of code smaller than a text message could make cash machines blink, flights stall, and parts of a country go dark? What if a voice on the phone sounded exactly like your boss right down to the accent and told you to move money now? And what if a company kept your password in a way that seemed safe until criminals turned your own hints and habits against you? Tonight, we opened 3 cyber case files that didn't just change the headlines, they rewrote the rules in code and in human behavior. 3 attacks, 3 different doors kicked open, one pattern you can spot before it hits you. Imagine the early 2000s internet, a place of optimism and exposed edges. On a cold January weekend in 2003, a worm whispered across the wires 376 bytes long, short enough to fit in a single packet. It didn't need to plant a file or leave a footprint. It only needed an open door most people forgot existed. Microsoft SQL Server's tiny helper, the one that tells other machines, "I'm here," listened on a port that hardly anyone thought about. A flaw had been found and fixed months earlier, and a patch was available, but patches that haven't been applied are like locked doors with a spare key still under the welcome mat. The worm didn't knock, it slipped through. Here's how it unfolded in plain terms. Some servers ran a little program that would answer ping-like requests for database services. Hidden in that exchange was a coding mistake, a buffer that would overflow if you fed it more than it was designed to chew. Feed it the right, carefully shaped junk, and it starts to run the attacker's instructions instead of its own. No password, no login. Just one burst of data, small and sharp, over a simple mail slot style protocol called UDP. It's like tossing a note into a mailbox that, if it's the wrong kind of mailbox, opens the door to your house. That note contained a loop. When a machine received the worm, it immediately started spraying the same packet at random internet addresses, looking for other machines with the same forgotten door. This wasn't a polite scan, it was a fire hose. Because the code didn't stop to check or wait, traffic spiked and spiked again. Within minutes, tens of thousands of servers began doing the same thing. It was a feedback loop of panic at machine speed. Networks turned into parking lots. Emergency systems in some cities lost connectivity. Airline check-in systems lagged and blinked out. Across the Pacific, entire chunks of a national backbone slowed to a crawl. You could watch it on maps of the internet like blood vessels suddenly constricting, a time-lapse of arteries clogging. SQL Slammer tiny, memory resident, consuming no disk, leaving little to clean up, carved its name into history by exploiting a truth so simple it feels almost insulting. Patches that exist still have to be applied. The bug it exploited had been publicly documented, the fix available for months. But patches compete with priorities, maintenance windows, fear of breaking things that currently work. If you've ever clicked "Remind me later," you understand how the worm won. It didn't have to be sophisticated, it had to be fast, and it had to find the door open. The story doesn't end with a patch note or an apology. It ends with people staring at screens, trying to breathe through network congestion so dense that even the tools to fix the problem were stuck in traffic. It ends with a lesson that isn't about coding, but about discipline. That morning, we learned that speed is its own kind of weapon, that a single packet can ring like a bell, and that the cost of a delay can be measured in hours lost and systems offline. And if you zoom out far enough, you see the shape of the first case file, initial foothold through an unpatched flaw, escalation by hijacking a process that trusted input too much, payload as self-replication, impact as an internet-scale traffic jam. A worm is just a burglar who also photocopies himself and sends 1,000 copies to your neighbors. Now, tilt the camera forward a decade to 2013 and watch a different kind of breach unfold. The target this time wasn't a single protocol or a misbehaving packet. It was a treasure room one floor above the gift shop, user accounts, email addresses, password hints, and source code for products used by millions. The name on the building was large and familiar, the kind of software brand people install on their first day with a new computer. Inside that building, someone moved quietly. we still don't have the full tour of their route. That's the thing about an intruder who takes their time. You discovered that they were in because you noticed what they took, not how they walked in. Here's what made the breach unforgettable. The attackers didn't just take a list of users. They walked out with something that felt like a blueprint, a trove of source code for flagship products and a chest of customer data, email addresses, password hints written in plain language, and the passwords themselves, not as simple text, but as encrypted strings. To most people, that sounds fine. Encrypted means safe, right? But here's the twist. There's a reason modern best practice is to hash passwords, not encrypt them. A hash is like a blender. Once you pulp the fruit, you can't get the chunks back out. Encryption is more like a locked box. With the key, you can open it. If someone steals the box and the key or finds another way to decode the patterns, the fruit is still fruit. Even without a key, patterns can betray you. When you encrypt a lot of similar data the same way, over and over, you give attackers the chance to play a kind of crossword puzzle. They don't see the answers, but they see the shapes. Popular passwords have recognizable patterns. Combine that with password hints, first dog's name, favorite team, my birth city, and the puzzle starts to solve itself. The result wasn't just one crack safe, it was many, because human nature hands out duplicates. People reuse passwords. Over here, a design forum. Over there, a shopping account. Somewhere else, a personal email. Once your favorite password leaks in one place, it becomes a skeleton key tried against every door with your name on it. A leak in a brand you trust becomes a break-in at a service you forgot you ever used. The aftermath was strange and public. Security researchers spotted chunks of data posted where they shouldn't be. Journalists wrote the kind of article no company wants to read about itself, the kind with screenshots and files everyone recognized. The company acknowledged the breach, reset passwords, and started the long march of notices and remediation. But the hardest damage to quantify was quiet and slow. Accounts hijacked elsewhere by credential stuffing, where attackers try your leaked email and favorite password on other logins. Months later, users who never read tech news wondered why their inboxes were forwarding mail to a stranger or why purchases appeared they couldn't explain. Meanwhile, competitors and criminals poured over stolen source code, not as a treasure for its own sake, but as a map to weaknesses. If the worm taught us about speed, this breach taught us about echoes. One company's lapse became many people's headache. One technical choice, encrypting passwords instead of hashing them securely with modern methods, turned a locked box into a puzzle board. And the unsparing, human truth at the center of it all is simple. The password you use the most is the one you'll lose everywhere. Before we open the third file, breathe with me for a moment. If you're drawn to understanding how real-world hacks unfold, without hype, but with enough detail to keep you ahead of the next twist, you're in the right place. If you want more deep dives like this, subscribe and turn on notifications. It tells the system you want more case files in your feed. The last case isn't about code at all, at least not the part you can see. It's about a voice. In the spring of 2019, the head of a small subsidiary picked up the phone. On the line was his boss, or rather, a voice that sounded like his Boston, cadence accent. The message was urgent but plausible. We need to transfer funds to a supplier today to keep the business moving. Details followed: an amount a mid-level approval could authorize, a bank in Europe, a time window that pressed on the caller's nerves. There was context, there was confidence. There was the subtle pressure of hierarchy. And there was a sound that triggered trust before the brain finished its check. Here's the technique in human terms. Deepfake voice is a kind of audio puppet. Feed a model enough samples of how someone speaks, targeted clips, public interviews, internal town halls that leak, and you can synthesize new sentences that mimic them. The result can be imperfect, but in a rushed minute on a noisy line, perfect isn't required. Pair that imitation with a spoofed caller ID and a believable ask, and you have a spear tip made of familiarity. There's no inbox rule that catches it, no link to hover over. It comes to you sounding like authority. It comes alive in the moment you choose to trust. The transfer went out hundreds of thousands of euros. The money didn't sit, it moved. It flowed through accounts designed to pass it along, each hop faster than the last. By the time questions rose, the trail was already foreign, then gone. A second call came later, asking for more. That's what breaks the spell for many victims, the escalation. The first ask fits the box of uncomfortable but reasonable. The second turns the screws until something in your gut says, check the records. The target in this case hesitated, verified, and realized the frame had been staged. Authorities and insurers would later describe it in careful language. But the core never changes. No firewall stands between a convincing voice and a rushed decision. The anatomy of this attack mirrors the others. Initial foothold was social, a call that sounded real. Escalation was urgency and detail, facts salted with the right names. The payload was a wire transfer, irreversible by design. The impact was monetary, but the blast radius included trust. Afterward, every call from a superior feels a little haunted. Every urgent request carries a shadow. And that shadow spreads because once the story is public, others try it, variations bloom. A message from your CFO, a voicemail from IT about a two-factor reset, a loved one asking for help from a number you recognize. This isn't fear-mongering, it's pattern recognition. The cost of a callback policy is minutes. The cost of not having one can be rent money, payroll, or more. 3 files, 3 very different scenes. But if you had to write the common playbook on a napkin, it would go like this. They find the door that no one's looking at. They exploit a human shortcut. They move fast in a space where speed matters more than stealth. The worm rode the physics of the internet. The breach rode our tendency to reuse. The voice rode the social contract of workplace urgency. So what can someone who doesn't run a data center or a multinational do about any of this? You don't need a SOC, you need reflexes. First, turn on multi-factor authentication everywhere it's offered, especially for email, banking, and social accounts. A second step in app prompt or hardware key turns a stolen password into a useless string. It won't save you from everything, but it changes the math in your favor when your credentials spill because someone else got breached. Second, update. Not just your phone's operating system, but your router, your computer, and whatever software nags you on a Tuesday afternoon. Auto-update where you can, schedule time where you can't. The lesson of the worm is that old doors stay open until you close them, and nothing is more frustrating than losing time to a vulnerability that already had a fix. Third, verify money instructions and sensitive requests through a trusted channel, ideally one you initiate. Call back using a number you already have on file. Agree on a shared phrase for approvals. Build a habit of pause and confirm. It's not paranoia, it's hygiene. In an era where voices can be forged and email headers can be faked, verification is the new lock the door. If you think of the internet as a city at night, these 3 cases are the pools of light under street lamps where we saw clearly, for a moment, how the thieves worked. We saw the speed of a worm and the drag of a congested artery. We watched the way encrypted doesn't always mean safe when habits and patterns play along. We heard a voice almost right and felt our instincts glitch. What broke systems then still breaks them now, because technology evolves faster than human nature. But so do defenses when they become habits instead of chores. Patches are boring until they're not. Password managers feel fussy until your favorite phrase shows up in a dump. Verification feels redundant until a phone call tells you to move what you're not ready to lose. None of these stories require you to write code or disassemble a packet to understand them. They require you to see the pattern. The initial foothold is always closer than we think. The escalation always looks like something we wanted to do anyway. The payload always camouflages as routine. And the impact always ripples beyond the first victim. Somewhere, right now, there's a small update you've been putting off. Somewhere else, there's a password you've reused because it was easy. And somewhere, a future call will ask you to move quickly. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be practiced. Maybe that's the quiet revelation behind every cyber case file worth keeping. The solution isn't a silver bullet. It's a stack of mundane choices done well and done often. Click Update, use the code that pops up on your phone. Make the call before you move the money. Save the drama for the stories we tell here, where the darkness stays on the screen and the lessons stay with you when you step away. And when you hear about an ancient worm, a leaked archive, or a voice that sounds just a little too right, you'll recognize the shape of the attack without needing the headline. You'll see the door and keep it closed. You'll feel the pressure and let it pass. You'll look at the map of a city at night and know that, for all its shadows, you've learned how to walk it.